Looking at the night sky, you might see what appears to be a string of moving stars. That's Starlink. But while Elon Musk marketed it as bringing internet to rural communities, classified Pentagon documents reveal a different story. This isn't just about faster Wi-Fi for farmers. We're looking at the most sophisticated military infrastructure ever deployed in space, one that's quietly reshaping how wars are fought and who controls the ultimate high ground. When SpaceX launched its first batch of Starlink satellites in 2019, the company positioned it as a humanitarian effort to connect underserved populations worldwide. The marketing was brilliant. Who could argue against bridging the digital divide? But behind this noble facade, defense contractors and Pentagon officials were already planning something far more strategic. Internal documents show that as early as 2020, the U.S. Army had signed agreements to test Starlink for military applications. This wasn't an afterthought or a pivot. The military potential was baked into the system from day one. The real awakening came in February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Within hours of the first missile strikes, thousands of Starlink terminals were flowing across Ukrainian borders. The official story was humanitarian aid to restore internet connectivity. But Ukrainian forces immediately began using these terminals for military coordination, artillery targeting, and drone operations. What we witnessed wasn't improvised adaptation. It was the live deployment of a weapon system that had been in development for years. Consider the technical specifications that make Starlink uniquely suited for warfare. Traditional military satellites orbit 22,000 miles above Earth, making them sitting ducks for anti-satellite weapons. Starlink operates at just 340 miles up, with over 7,000 satellites creating a constellation that's virtually impossible to eliminate. More importantly, the system provides sub-second communication, fast enough to guide precision weapons in real time. Ukrainian artillery units discovered they could receive targeting data from reconnaissance drones and fire accurate strikes within seconds, not the hours required with conventional systems. But the Ukraine deployment was just the public face of a much larger military program. In 2021, Reuters revealed that SpaceX had signed a classified $1.8 billion contract with the National Reconnaissance Office, America's spy satellite agency.
This contract, codenamed Starshield, created a network of military-grade satellites capable of continuous global surveillance. Unlike commercial Starlink satellites that relay internet traffic, these platforms carry sophisticated intelligence payloads that can track mobile missile launchers, monitor troop movements, and intercept enemy communications. The scope of this surveillance network is staggering. Traditional spy satellites might photograph a specific location once per day. Starshield promises continuous monitoring with revisit times measured in minutes. NRO Director Chris Scalise put it bluntly in 2024, "You can't hide because we're constantly looking." This capability fundamentally changes military strategy. Mobile nuclear weapons, historically impossible to track accurately, become visible and potentially targetable. The strategic stability that has prevented nuclear war for decades starts to break down when one side can see everything the other side is doing. Pentagon officials have been remarkably candid about their long-term vision. The 2025 defense budget allocated $277 million for something called MilNet, a dedicated military satellite constellation of over 480 platforms. This isn't dual-use civilian infrastructure that occasionally helps the military. It's purpose-built military hardware designed for what defense planners call sensor-to-shooter operations. A reconnaissance drone spots an enemy tank, satellite networks relay targeting data, and an artillery system fires, all within seconds and without human intervention. The implications extend far beyond traditional warfare. Space Force documents describe integration with America's nuclear command and control systems, potentially enabling rapid response to missile launches anywhere on Earth. The same network that brings Netflix to rural Montana could theoretically guide nuclear weapons to their targets with unprecedented precision. This dual-use model provides perfect operational security. Who would suspect that entertainment satellites might be military assets? Foreign governments certainly aren't fooled.
Chinese military researchers have published dozens of papers analyzing Starlink's military capabilities and developing countermeasures. They've concluded that the system provides round-the-clock coverage of Chinese territory, giving American forces unprecedented intelligence advantages in any potential conflict.
Beijing's response has been swift and concerning, developing anti-satellite weapons, cyber warfare capabilities, and according to some intelligence reports, potentially nuclear weapons designed specifically to disable satellite constellations. Russia has taken a more direct approach, with forces illegally obtaining Starlink terminals for their own military operations despite official restrictions. The fact that Russian commanders sought access to American-controlled satellites for their war effort demonstrates just how militarily valuable the system has become. SpaceX and the Pentagon have had to develop countermeasures to prevent adversary use, essentially turning Starlink into a weapon that can be selectively disabled based on geopolitical considerations. This brings us to perhaps the most troubling aspect of Starlink's militarization, the unprecedented power it gives to Elon Musk over American foreign policy. When Ukrainian forces planned attacks on Russian naval vessels using Starlink-guided drones, Musk personally intervened to limit the system's coverage, effectively preventing military operations. A private citizen was making strategic military decisions that could influence the outcome of an active war. This level of corporate control over national defense represents something entirely new in American history. Current contracts between SpaceX and the federal government exceed $22 billion, with the vast majority coming from defense and intelligence agencies. This financial relationship creates mutual dependence that limits government oversight while maximizing Musk's influence. Traditional defense contractors build specific weapons or platforms under strict government control. Musk controls the infrastructure that enables all modern military operations, giving him leverage that no defense contractor has ever possessed. The broader implications are reshaping global power dynamics in ways we're only beginning to understand. NATO allies worry about depending on American-controlled infrastructure for their national defense. Authoritarian regimes view Starlink as an existential threat that must be countered at any cost. The peaceful use of space, enshrined in international law since the 1960s, is giving way to rapid militarization as nations scramble to develop their own capabilities or counter American advantages. Perhaps most concerning is how this technology could lower the threshold for conflict. Meanwhile, Russia and China are catching up quickly, cultivating their own networks that will inevitably compete with Starlink in other ways. When military operations can be coordinated in seconds rather than hours, when intelligence is available in real time rather than days after the fact, the time available for diplomatic solutions shrinks dramatically. The same technology that makes military forces more effective also makes wars more likely by reducing the costs and risks of military action. We're witnessing the emergence of a new kind of military-industrial complex, one where private corporations don't just supply weapons, but control the infrastructure that makes modern warfare possible. The decisions made in SpaceX boardrooms about satellite coverage, system capabilities, and access controls directly influence global military balances and international stability. This represents a fundamental shift in how democratic societies control their military forces and conduct foreign policy. Looking ahead, the militarization of Starlink appears to be accelerating rather than slowing down. Plans for tens of thousands of additional satellites, integration with hypersonic weapon systems, and development of space-based manufacturing capabilities suggest we're still in the early stages of this transformation. The constellation that began as a promise to connect the world's underserved populations has become the backbone of American military supremacy in the 21st century. The question we should be asking isn't whether this technology will change warfare. It already has. The question is whether democratic societies can maintain control over private military infrastructure that operates beyond traditional regulatory frameworks and gives unprecedented power to individual corporate leaders. As we look up at those moving points of light crossing the night sky, we're not just seeing the future of internet connectivity. We're seeing the evolution of warfare itself, controlled by a handful of private companies and individuals whose decisions can determine the fate of nations. What do you think? Should critical military infrastructure remain under private control? Or does this concentration of power pose risks that outweigh the technological advantages? Share your thoughts below, because this conversation will shape how we navigate an increasingly complex and militarized world.